Welcome to the Deep Dive. We plunge straight into the most compelling subjects, really cutting through the noise to get to the fascinating core of complex topics.
Exactly.
And today, well, we're diving into a force that has literally shaped human history, often with devastating impact: infectious diseases.
Yeah, it's profound when you think about it.
It really is. I mean, think about it, from ancient times right up to our most recent global events. These invisible threats have influenced civilizations, driven migrations, even subtly altered our own biology.
They're a constant reminder, aren't they, of our connection to the natural world.
An ancient, powerful reminder.
And for this deep dive, we're looking at, well, the largest study to date on the history of infectious diseases. It's groundbreaking stuff.
Okay.
This research takes us back, wait for it, 37,000 years into Eurasia.
Wow.
Yeah, using cutting-edge ancient DNA analysis. So our mission really is to uncover how these diseases emerge, how they spread, across continents,
Sure.
and the marks they left on our ancestors. But maybe more importantly, what can those ancient insights offer us for our future?
Right. So the sources for this sounds monumental. What are we working with?
They're pretty remarkable. We're primarily pulling from ancient plagues, 37,000 years of disease history, and the key Nature paper, the spatiotemporal distribution of human pathogens in ancient Eurasia.
Okay, the Nature paper. Got it.
It's a huge undertaking, led by Professor S. Gillerslev and his team. They analyzed DNA from over 1,300 prehistoric human bones and teeth.
1,300 across Eurasia.
Yep, across Eurasia. And this incredible effort recovered genetic traces from 214 known human pathogens.
214. That gives us a unique, like a time-lapse view?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
A time-lapse view of disease evolution and spread. Now, for those perhaps less familiar, when we talk about ancient DNA analysis, or this term genomic paleoepidemiology, what exactly does that mean? How do you see diseases from so long ago?
Good question. How does that actually work?
It's essentially molecular archaeology.
Oh.
We're extracting and sequencing DNA from ancient remains, bones, teeth that can be thousands, tens of thousands of years old.
Right.
And crucially, we're not just looking at the human DNA. We're sifting through it, looking for tiny fragments of microbial DNA.
Ah, the pathogens themselves.
Exactly. The genetic fingerprints of the bacteria, viruses, other pathogens that once infected those individuals.
Even if there are no visible signs on the skeleton.
Precisely. That's the power of it. It lets us directly identify the specific diseases our ancestors carried. It's like building this unprecedented map of disease history, piece by molecular piece.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. It's incredible technology. So among all these discoveries using this method, what was the most surprising finding for you? Was there like an aha moment?
That's a tough one. There were quite a few. But for me, one of the striking findings really tackles a question that's become so relevant today, with recent events.
Okay.
When did zoonotic diseases, those illnesses, pass from animals to humans? When did they truly become a major force?
Right, like COVID.
Exactly. The study found the earliest known DNA evidence dates back to around 6,500 years ago.
6,500 years?
But then they become significantly more widespread about 5,000 years ago. There's a definite uptick.
And I'm guessing the timing of that's not just random. It sounds like it lines up with something big.
Oh, not random at all. It precisely aligns with that huge shift in human civilization. The widespread adoption of farming, animal husbandry.
Keeping animals close.
Exactly. And also large-scale migrations, particularly those pastoralists coming from the Pontic steppe region.
So the study provides actual DNA evidence for this link.
Yes, this isn't just confirming a long-held theory. It's providing the molecular smoking gun.
Wow.
Farming wasn't just about food security. It fundamentally rewrote our relationship with disease. It opened the door to a new era of zoonotic threats.
An epidemiological transition.
That's the term, yes. A major shift in disease patterns linked directly to how society changed. And we now have direct molecular proof.
So connecting that ancient history to us right now, what does it tell us? Especially given that, over 60% of new infectious diseases today still come from animals.
Yeah, that's the sobering statistic. The critical takeaway, I think, is that our ancient past isn't just history. It's like a detailed hazard map for future pandemics.
A hazard map. I like that.
Every time we significantly alter how we interact with the animal kingdom, deforestation, intensive farming, global trade, we're potentially drawing new lines on that map. We're echoing what our ancestors did with the agricultural revolution.
So understanding that ancient pattern is key to preparing for what might come next.
Absolutely key. It helps us anticipate where the risks might lie.
That is a powerful and, Slightly chilling thought. Okay, so let's zoom in a bit. Moving from that big picture to the microscopic level. When we look at specific ancient diseases, which pathogens really stood out in the study? Where did the data lead you first?
Where you also have to start with the big one, right? Plague.
Yersinia pestis.
Exactly. Caused by the bacterium Yersinia pestis. And this study uncovered the world's oldest genetic trace of it.
Oldest ever found. How old?
5,500 years old. In a sample from that long ago.
That's just mind-blowing to think about plague being around back then. And what about its early spread? Was it just, isolated outbreaks popping up here and there?
That's what's really interesting. No, not at all. The study identified 42 cases of Y. pestis.
42.
Yeah. And the earliest ones, dating back 5,700 to 5,300 years ago, were found across a surprisingly broad area.
How broad.
We're talking from Western Russia, across Central Asia, all the way over to Lake Baikal in Siberia.
Wow, that's a huge range. So much for isolated spillover.
Right. It challenges that idea completely. It suggests a higher potential for maybe not pandemics like later, but certainly local epidemic outbreaks even that early on.
That is really insightful. And I understand the pattern of plague detection changed over time. It wasn't constant.
Correct. Initially, it seems to have been detected more continuously in certain areas, almost like it was endemic, just simmering away. But later, you see these distinct waves and then periods where it seems to vanish from the record, which matches up perfectly with the historically described pandemics.
Like the Black Death.
Exactly. And this shift isn't just random chance. The study links it to important genetic changes in the bacterium itself,
What kind of changes?
particularly acquiring genes that boosted its ability to be transmitted by fleas
Ah, the flea connection.
and generally made it more pathogenic, more dangerous. And just to show how long its shadow is, the study found 11 cases in late medieval and early modern Danish cemeteries.
So it remained a major threat for millennia.
Absolutely, a devastating impact again and again.
Okay, so while plague obviously gets a lot of attention, this study also brought other, maybe less famous, ancient threats into the light, like louse-borne relapsing fever, LBRF.
That's right. And it's important not to overlook these others. LDRF, caused by the bacterium Borrelia recurrentis. The study found 34 new cases.
34. So it was much more common than we thought.
It certainly indicates it was far more prevalent than we could tell just from looking at ancient skeletons before.
And the age of these cases is quite telling too, isn't it? What does it suggest about, well, how people lived?
Very telling. The earliest case they detected was in a Neolithic farmer from Scandinavia, about 5,600 years ago.
Neolithic, so even before the Bronze Age.
Yeah. It suggests that human body lice were already effective vectors for infectious diseases way back then.
Ugh, lice.
Yep. And the highest detection rates for LBRF, they were during the Iron Age and the Viking Age.
Which makes sense, right? More crowded living conditions, maybe hygiene wasn't always top priority.
Exactly. Those periods often involved conditions ripe for lice spreading. And what's also really interesting is the contrast they observed.
How so?
Periods when LBRF detection was high often coincided with times when plague seemed to be undetectable in the samples.
Ah, so it reinforces that the lack of plague wasn't just because the samples were bad?
Precisely. It suggests these were real fluctuations in disease prevalence. When plague was low, maybe other things like LBRF were taking hold.
Fascinating interplay. Okay, beyond plague and LBRF, were there any other discoveries that genuinely, caught you off guard, something unexpected?
Oh, absolutely. There were several. For example, leprosy. Mycobacterium leprae.
Leprosy, right.
They found 7 cases, mostly in Scandinavia, starting around the late Iron Age.
Okay.
But here's where it gets really intriguing. The researchers suggested a possible link to an increase in the squirrel fur trade during the late Iron and Viking Ages.
Squirrel fur. How does that link to leprosy?
Apparently, red squirrels can carry the leprosy bacterium. So the idea is maybe increased handling of squirrels or their pelts facilitated transmission to humans.
Squirrels! That's genuinely surprising. So Viking fashion choices might have spread leprosy.
It's a hypothesis, but it definitely raises questions about trade networks and unexpected disease routes much earlier than we might think.
Definitely. What else?
Well, they also found 3 cases of Treponema pallidum. That's the bacterium behind syphilis and yaws.
Okay.
These were from more recent periods, but importantly, one case expanded the paleogenomic evidence into Southeast Asia, specifically Borneo.
So broadening the map for that disease group too.
Exactly. And then there's Yersinia enterocolitica. It causes yersiniosis, a gut infection.
Another Yersinia related to plague.
Same genus. different species, different disease. They found 12 new cases. And crucially, this is one of the only zoonotic infections they identified way back in Mesolithic hunter-gatherer contexts.
Mesolithic. So before farming really took off.
Yeah, around 6,400 years ago.
Yeah.
You often get this one from contaminated meat boar, deer, later cattle. It shows that even hunter-gatherers weren't totally free from animal-borne diseases.
Right. So the agricultural shift amplified things, but didn't start it from zero. What about things like leptospirosis?
Good question. Leptospirosis, caused by Leptospira bacteria. The earliest evidence they found dates to the Neolithic, around 5,600 years ago in Sweden.
Neolithic again. Sweden seems to pop up a bit.
It does. And they found different types of Leptospira, which is interesting because it shows the variety of threats. Some might have spread directly from livestock like cattle, others through animal urine contaminating water or soil.
Different routes of infection.
Exactly. And one that surprised me with its age was diphtheria.
Diphtheria. I think of that as more recent.
Me too, typically.
Hmm.
But they found a case of Carnibacterium diphtheria dating back to the Mesolithic era, over 11,000 years ago.
11,000. Wow.
Yeah, surprisingly ancient origins for that one.
Incredible. Any sign of malaria or hepatitis B? Those are ancient foes too.
Definitely. Malaria caused by Plasmodium species, they identified 9 cases. The earliest was in a Bronze Age individual from Central Europe, maybe around 4,000 years ago, give or take.
Okay, Bronze Age for malaria there.
And hepatitis B virus, HBV. That turned out to be really widespread.
Oh.
Cases stretched all the way back to the Mesolithic in Siberia, nearly 10,000 years ago.
10,000 years for Hep B. It really paints a picture of a landscape full of different microbial threats.
A complex and dangerous landscape, for sure.
And it's clear from what you're saying, people back then weren't just dealing with one illness at a time. This study seems to really hammer home that co-infections were common.
Oh, very common. Often the rule, not the exception. And the study provides clear molecular evidence for this.
Can you give us some examples? What kind of combinations did they find?
The examples are quite striking and, frankly, grim. For instance, they found one Viking Age individual from Norway
Okay.
who was infected with both the smallpox-causing variola virus and the leprosy bacterium, Mycobacterium leprae.
Smallpox and leprosy at the same time. That's brutal.
Absolutely brutal. Another Viking Age person, this time from Denmark, showed evidence of both leprosy and leptospirosis.
Just piling on.
It really seems like it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just bacterial or viral pairings. You mentioned hepatitis B earlier.
Oh, the widespread one.
There were 6 cases where HBV was found co-occurring with other serious non-viral pathogens,
Like what?
like plague or louse-borne relapsing fever or even malaria.
Wow. So someone could have chronic hepatitis B and then contract plague.
That's what the researchers suggest. These were likely cases of chronic hepatitis, maybe contracted in infancy, which often leads to a lifelong infection, and then they got hit with something else acutely life-threatening on top of it.
Unimaginable. Even further back.
Even way back.
Yeah.
A Mesolithic hunter-gatherer from Russia, over 11,000 years old, showed evidence of co-infection with diphtheria and a gastric infection, Helicobacter pylori, the stomach bug one.
So even 11,000 years ago, people were fighting battles on multiple fronts, disease-wise.
It certainly looks that way.
So thinking bigger picture again, these widespread infections, these co-infections, they obviously caused immense individual suffering. But what were the broader implications for populations, maybe even for our biology?
That's a crucial question. These infections weren't just personal tragedies. They likely played a role in major population declines we see in the archaeological record.
Right.
They could have spurred migrations, people trying to escape diseased areas. And over the long term, they almost certainly drove genetic adaptations in human populations.
Especially in our immune systems.
Exactly. Influencing immune genes, selecting for individuals who were better able to survive certain infections. There's even this fascinating idea connecting it back to those steppe migrations.
The ones that coincided with the rise of zoonotic diseases.
Yeah. The significant genetic upheaval we see in Europe around that time, coinciding with the arrival of steppe pastoralists, could it have been partly facilitated by waves of new zoonotic diseases hitting the existing Neolithic farming populations harder?
Well, so the newcomers might have had some resistance, or the established groups were weakened.
It's a possibility this kind of research raises. It makes you rethink not just health history, but population history too.
It really does change how you view those major historical transitions. Absolutely fascinating. So bringing it all together, what does this mean for us looking forward? How does this new field, genomic paleoepidemiology, actually help us today?
Well, the implications for modern medicine and public health are actually pretty significant.
How so?
By understanding how diseases arose, spread, and importantly, mutated in the past,
Huh.
figuring out which mutations were successful for the pathogen allowed it to thrive. That information can help us predict future outbreaks or how current pathogens might evolve.
So it's like having a historical playbook for pathogens.
In a way, yes. And crucially, this knowledge can inform the development of new vaccines. Or it can help us assess how effective our current vaccines might be against slightly different evolving strains of these ancient enemies.
So it's a predictive tool, really, for public health strategy.
A critical predictive tool, I'd argue, built from mapping the past.
Of course, science is always ongoing. No single study answers everything. What are some of the limitations or challenges researchers still face in this field?
Oh, absolutely. And the researchers are upfront about them. Things like dealing with very low amounts of pathogen DNA, and some samples it can be hard to detect.
Makes sense.
Differentiating a real infection from just background environmental DNA contamination is always a challenge.
Right, soil is full of microbes.
Exactly. And currently, the methods are much better suited for DNA viruses and bacteria. Getting ancient RNA virus data, like for influenza or coronaviruses, is much, much harder.
So there are still gaps in the picture.
For sure. But these aren't really roadblocks, you know? They just highlight that this is a dynamic field, science discovering things step by step. The map is constantly evolving, getting more detailed with every new ancient bone or tooth they analyze.
It's an incredible journey of discovery. This deep dive, it really reveals how those fundamental shifts in human lifestyle, I mean, the big one being the move to farming and living closely with animals,
Yeah, the Neolithic Revolution.
were just such powerful drivers of disease emergence and spread. And they've profoundly affected human health and our history for literally millennia.
A deep, deep connection between how we live and the diseases we face.
And a reminder of our connection to the natural world and how our choices, even thousands of years ago, have these long-lasting echoes.
Absolutely.
So here's a thought maybe to ponder as you go about your day. If that move from hunter-gatherer to farmer so dramatically reshaped our disease landscape back then, what surprising, maybe hidden impacts might our current lifestyle changes, think about unprecedented urbanization, rapid global travel like never before, what impact might those have on the pathogens of tomorrow?
Yeah.
How might our choices today, right now, be shaping the ancient plagues of our descendants?
It's a profound question, isn't it? What future maps are we drawing right now?